So, over the course of our lives as students, we have always been trained to believe in the greatness of the American educational system. The idea that if we go to school, get good grades, we will all be prepared for life, essentially. The idea of that has basically been branded into our minds. But, however, is it really true? Are we really being educated on important topics such as, more specifically, finance and economics? No, speaking of finance and economics, the United States right now, along with the rest of the world, is currently in an unofficial recession due to the worldwide shutdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Economic records have been being shattered, but not in a good way. In the words of CNBC, the U.S. economy is currently in a medically induced coma. Just in the last 3 weeks, 22 million Americans have filed for unemployment. Businesses are closed, spending is at an all-time standstill, and personal income is quite non-existent nowadays. And for all of us as students leading up to graduation right around now, it's a very scary time to be leaving school and entering the workforce, especially when in Pennsylvania the average student loan debt leaving school is $37,000. Excuse me. Given the current state of the economy, it is now more important than ever for us to be able to make smart economic decisions and to act financially literate. However, even after completing the highest level of education in the U.S., are we legitimately financially literate by now? Can we function economically on our own at this point? These ideas are what led me into my research project, which is where I examine the effectiveness of the United States educational system in producing students who are financially literate. So my project is based off the belief that there is evidence that the current educational system in the United States does not adequately educate students on life applicable topics such as finance and economics, more specifically. In a study done by Breitbach and Wallstad, young adults do have a significantly lower level of financial literacy relative to their older counterparts. So people ages 35 and up consistently tested more financially literate than those ages 18 to 35. This supports the idea that financial knowledge is being gathered through personal experiences post-graduation and not through education. Moving ahead with the theme of age, another study asked for the opinion of older adults whether they think graduating students are prepared for the real world. Out of 1,500 adults surveyed, only 5% of them believe that graduating students today, are prepared to enter the workforce and live on their own. Holding entering the workforce and being financially independent synonymous there, adults who have gone through the same educational system that responded to this survey all believe that it does not prepare students for the real world. Focusing on education up through high school, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 70% of high school graduates will enter college. Enrolling into a college and university is no doubt a massive financial commitment. So let's see, from the perspective of a high schooler, the AP issued a financial literacy test to high school seniors. Score on the test, 50% or above meant that they are financially literate. However, the average test score for the respondents was 48%, pretty much proving that all high school seniors entering college, making that financial commitment, they really don't understand what they're getting into or what's around them. Now switching topics to college students. This is the stage of life where long-lasting personal financial decisions become a reality. Students at the top of the educational system set themselves up early for financial success or financial loss. For example, between 2000 and 2010, the price of undergraduate tuition, board, and room increased 42%, or 142%. In a study done, in a certain study, 574 undergrad students from a university were tested. 49% of those students had over a 3.0 GPA. The overall mean percentage of questions answered correctly by them was 46%, again under 50%, which is the financial literate threshold. And given the fact that 42% of those respondents were freshmen, that shows that the education before college they had coming in didn't educate them on finance and economics. And also the rest of the 58% of the respondents that were upperclassmen who were also not financially literate shows that the college education didn't educate them as well. So someone looking at that, someone may have the idea that students are receiving education on finance and economics, they just aren't producing results. The evidence from a study done by Kevin Nguyen on high school students would refute that argument. A group of students were tested on their financial literacy and scores were collected. Then half of those students were placed into a finance educational course, and the other half continued on their own way. How long later, the group who took the class was tested again, and the group who didn't take the class was tested. And the group who took the class tested much, much higher in financial literacy compared to those who did not. So that shows that financial education is effective and improves one's financial literacy. So overall, the existing research on my topic supports a few ideas. Number one, the U.S. general education system does not produce financially literate students. Number two, Americans are not becoming financially literate until later in life, which means that they're learning it through personal experiences, trial and error, out on their own. And the majority of test results show that students who receive financial education become more financially literate than those who do not receive financial education. So now, kind of moving into my methods section, I will be conducting a longitudinal study using quantitative tactics to test the financial literacy and self-perceived financial literacy of high school seniors, college seniors, and graduates. The goal of this study is to determine whether or not the general education system in the United States is producing financial literate students. The results can be used to rule my hypothesis of the U.S. general education system can improve the lives of young adults by increasing education on finance and economics, accurate or inaccurate. My research study will take place specifically in the continental U.S. 100 students will take this quantitative test. All types of schools, such as urban, rural, public, and private, will be included. And the reason why I included all those different kinds of schools is because obviously students with different demographics, such as socioeconomic status or, the environment that their school is in, will definitely have an impact on their current economic understanding. So I want to get a full kind of view of all students in the U.S. instead of just limit to a specific school. This quantitative test will be sent out to school counselors. And I will ask them to distribute them to all freshmen in that school. It will be through a Google Forms link. It will consist of 5 questions used to test the financial literacy of the respondent. They will include financial calculation problems and economic understanding problems within those 5. They are actually modeled after the same questions used to test for financial literacy by the National Financial Capability Study. Concluding the test, there will be 3 more questions, and there will be yes or no answer questions. This is kind of get an opinion out of the respondents. Basically, the 3 questions, one asks, do you believe that you're currently financially literate? The second is, do you believe you've been educated on finance and economics up to that point? And finally, if they would like to see more financial education in the U.S. system. And then moving on to collecting that data. It'll all pretty much primarily be statistical. I will track the percentage of the financial literacy problems answered correctly. If their score is less than 50% answered correctly out of those 5 questions, then they are deemed currently financially illiterate. Then the data from the 3 opinionated questions will also turn out statistical due to its yes or no answer nature of the questions. And then, so the reason why I made this study longitudinal is as follows. So the sample of students included in my study will be tested a total of 5 times. The first test will occur when I send it out to the high schools when they're freshmen. So they get first tested as freshmen, then they get tested 3 or 4 years later when they're freshmen in college. Then they'll get tested again 3 or 4 years later when they're college seniors. Tested again 4 years post-graduation, then tested a final time 8 years post-graduation. The reason why I'm doing this is so I can see when in their life they are learning economics and when they're finally becoming financially literate. More specifically, is it happening in high school, college, 4 years after, 8 years after college? No, it's roughly a 14 to 15 years long study, which is kind of rough, but I believe it is important to see the growth of my test subjects within those 14 to 15 years so I can kind of see know where their financial knowledge is coming from, whether it's in high school, college, personal experiences after college, things like that. So yeah, I think that's all I got for you. So